Hey, grace and peace. Welcome to Find the Intersection. My name is Paul Dezay, and today is Monday, and we're going to be talking about the gospel passage in a second. Hey, I just wanted to kind of give you a recap of where I was last week. Last Thursday and Friday, I spent a few days there in Middletown, Ohio for the Centralized Conference, and it was amazing. Thank you to Scott and Jerry Lewis for leading that endeavor, and thank you to the amazing speakers, Alan Hirsch, Deb Hirsch, Hugh Halter, Lance Ford, Michael Frost, and many more. It was just an amazing time to be reminded that we are sent people. And so what we do here at Find the Intersection is we read the scriptures, realizing that God is sending us. So there's always this push outward to love on people. So anyway, great conference. So hey, let's jump into today. So we're talking about John chapter 13, verses 31 to 35. John 13, 31 to 35. Let's start with the context. So if you take a look at where this passage is in what came before it and what came after it, we're looking at the farewell discourse of Jesus. This is kind of the Maundy Thursday of Holy Week. So this is where Jesus washes his feet and Jesus shares the Last Supper, communion, before Jesus is arrested. So that's the context. Now, right before this passage that we're reading today is Judas dipping the bread and acknowledging that he will be the one that was prophesied to betray Jesus. So Judas left. And so this comes right after. And you would think that if that is just what happened and Judas acknowledged that he will betray Jesus, that Jesus would speak in some condemnation to the evil in which Judas was going to do, but he doesn't. He talks about love. It says, when Judas was gone, Jesus says, how the human one has been glorified and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify the human one in himself and will glorify him immediately. So this is really cool. So the first thing I want to point out is this word glorify, and the idea that Jesus is lifted up and that God is lifted up, even in the midst of what Judas is doing. And then if you would look to see the passage that follows this passage, it's Peter denying that he will deny Jesus 3 times, right? And so we see on either side of this statement is 2 people who did not cooperate with the mission of God in this moment, but yet Jesus is still glorified. Jesus is still lifted up in the midst of this disappointment. But Jesus is glorified through his death and his resurrection, but also his life, and what he's teaching to the disciples in this setting is glorification of the Father and the Son. So remember that Jesus's words are important to us in this farewell discourse. The second thing that jumped out to me in this passage is the way Jesus addressed the disciples as little children. And he says, little children, I'm with you for a little while and a little while longer, and you will look for me, but just as I told the Jewish leaders, I tell you now, where I'm going, you cannot come. Jesus speaks with compassion, and Jesus speaks with patience to these which he considers children, or his maybe younger brothers in this scenario as the family of God, right? So Jesus is speaking with patience. You know, Judas disappointed him. Right? Peter disappoints him here in a second. But Jesus still treats them with love, even in the midst of that disappointment. God's ways are working beyond the human effort that is, or failure that is involved in these stories, which is really cool. So even for me or for you, Jesus gets us in our struggles, looks at us as children who are growing in his image. And he understands Judas and understands Peter and understands us. Last thing is the new commandment to love one another the way that Jesus has loved us. Now, why is this considered a new commandment, especially if we've read this commandment in other places through the Bible? Why is it new? Well, the reason it's new is because the clarification of the type of love. Jesus says, love one another the way that I have loved you. And so the qualifier is love the way that Jesus loved. And this is the love that takes him to the cross. This is that cross type love. This is that sacrificial love. This is agape love. This is the love that we are to love one another with. And then he goes on and says that we'll be known by the way that we love one another. In other words, people will look at us as disciples of Jesus, as Christ followers, and know that we are by the way that we love one another, the way that we love people within the church, but also as we love our neighbor, which extends across boundaries, across walls, as we love enemies and as we love people who are different than us. Then people will know that we are truly Jesus' disciples. Powerful, powerful passage of scripture. I'm sure you got a lot more out of it than I did. So why don't you share in the comments some things that stood out to you, just a couple bullet points, just a couple words, so I can learn from you. And I hope this has been helpful for you. So tomorrow we'll be back as we talk about one of my favorite, if not my favorite passage in the entire Bible, Revelation chapter 21, verses 1-6. So, hey, share in the comments, and I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Grace and peace.